You going, Roy? Are you
Yeah.
going?
All right, at this time, we will call this workshop to order. Val, please call the roll.
Commissioner Penny,
Here.
Commissioner Curry,
Here.
Commissioner Danio,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson, Mayor Villa.
Here, thank you very much. And I have the goals list in front of me, Joe. I hope you have that as well.
Well, Val's going to pull it up on the.
Okay, good.
On the
overhead.
and we'll go from there. I don't know if you wanted to start with the goals or start where we ended at the last meeting with.
We
the
could,
budget.
we could start at either. We could start at the budget right now.
It may be better to conclude the budget because any potential changes, we need to conclude tonight so that Stella can make those changes for the public hearing in September.
Right.
So we'll jump into that. You know, I'll go ahead and start. We, after the last meeting, I had sent out a list of some very far-fetched, I'll call it, possible budget reductions that would really have a very, very negative impact on the departments if they were to actually be reduced, because we're at that point. So I really wouldn't recommend any of those changes with the exception of, we had budgeted for a 10% reduction, a 10% increase in our health benefits, and we're actually going to be flat on our increases this year. So there's a overall total savings of about $90,000, but that also gets split up into other departments. So it's not purely that in the general fund, it's about $55,000 in the general fund. So you could possibly reduce $50,000 out of that fund. And then also I'm considering a reduction of one full-time employee to part-time, which would be a savings of about $34,000. That's kind of the, I don't want to call it the easy stuff. It's never easy to reduce a full-time person's position down to part-time. But that makes up only a small portion, about a third of what would be needed to reduce the millage any further. So I'll kind of throw it out onto the floor for you and see if there's anybody else that has any thoughts about the millage rate or budget cuts, and take your direction.
Can you remind us what the difference of the, in dollars and cents of what the current rate is compared to rollback rate?
That's where I have to call upon my finance director.
Mrs. Gurney?
The difference between the current rate and the rollback rate?
Yes,
In
exact
terms of
dollar.
dollars?
Yeah.
It was, I'm guessing it was 106,
About 170?
I was going to say 167.
Okay,
167?
167,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what I thought.
okay,
It's close enough
all
for
right.
discussion purposes, I guess.
Well, then there's the CRA part too.
And then the CRA part is
Right, and
like
the CRA was another, I think, 90.
60,
60.
That was about 240 or 230,
Okay.
230.
about 70,000, we'll call it. All right. General. All right, so does anybody have any questions for any staff? All right. So we have 167,000, and then you said that off the bat, we're looking at a savings of 55,000 in insurance, and then 34,000 in a potential part-time position. So that is $89,000. So for the general fund, at least, that's going to lower the millage rate by quite a bit. We're at about halfway there from rollback to current rate. And that's cuts that you want to make right now.
That's monies that are available to me.
Okay.
The cut is something that I want to make. The insurance premium is there. That's
Yeah.
there no matter what we do.
Yeah. Does anybody have any objections to those?
I don't think it's going to work quite that way. You can't just apply that savings to the general fund. It carries over. It's going to affect the CRA also. It's not, you can't just.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't get halfway.
Well, we're just talking general fund now,
Yeah,
and then
but-
we'll talk CRA
Okay.
in a minute.
Yeah, I think we're okay in the CRA. You know,
Yeah.
like I said, if we had to cut the painting program, we can cut the painting program, but we've also got monies that we budgeted to contingency that we could
Right.
make up that difference. So
Right.
I'm less concerned.
Yeah,
with-
the CRA is pretty healthy unless you have an objection to it. We budget this year an increase of $350,000 into our budget contingency. And if we're 60 to 70,000, I think we could keep the paint program unless somebody wants to change around some of the numbers. And there's little savings here and there that we could discuss, but I think that's the easiest,
Mr.
most
Mayor.
efficient route. Yeah.
I'd just like to comment, as far as the painting program is concerned, I think we would be kind of double talking ourselves. We've asked code enforcement to move forward with getting our city up to code and the image and things of that nature, and we're going to turn around on the back end and say, no, we're not putting this money forth to try to help improve our business community. So I would not recommend that because, again,
Contradicting
it's all, yeah, thank you.
Right. And we didn't spend any money in the paint program this year, is that correct?
No, we didn't have it this year. We did it
Okay.
the year before, and it was pretty successful. We have quite a few businesses that took advantage of it. I think I don't know if we used all of the 50,000, but we got pretty darn close to it.
Do we have anything budgeted in that fund this year for painting? I don't
No.
think so.
No, the only
It's
thing we
just
have
the
is the
100,000.
regular CRA grant.
Okay. Is that primarily too because we lost Nick and
No, that
We
grant.
knew we were gonna-
No. That we don't have the painting program?
Right.
We didn't budget it for this year.
okay, all right. But I agree with you, Commissioner. I think that the paint program has been successful in the past. We have a new community director, what's the
Economic-
official title?
Economic development.
Economic development, there we go, that's a better title. It's another tool for him to be able to use for businesses, and we're going to need it. We are going to need it after recovering from one of the worst economic crises in my lifetime. And so we're going to need as many tools as we possibly need to bring back businesses, to help businesses, to entice new businesses, and to spur some redevelopment. So I agree with you there. Would anybody else like to talk to that or any other issue on the CRA? Yes.
I just wanted, I didn't know if, I see we're going to budget and potential reduction in millage rate. I didn't really want to talk about CRA, but I wanted to talk about that topic in general, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So it's a chicken and the egg. So we're talking reducing the millage rate. And thankfully, Florida Healthcare does, the big applause is for Florida Healthcare. There's no rate increase this year. So there's a savings there. But then I don't want us to go, all right, the millage rate's going to go to this because now we're going to start talking about goals, and some of those goals may have costs associated with them. And so I tried to do a reality check for myself and maybe make an illustration for my fellow commissioners. For years, as long as I can remember, Holly Hill has compared themselves to South Daytona. About the same demographics, same population, same size. And so I just started doing some research, and I was surprised that I hadn't done it recently because we are worlds apart. When you look at our taxable values in the city of Holly Hill, and I'll just use round numbers, we are about $50 million more assessed value in our city than South Daytona is. That's a really good thing. But then what we always get caught up in is the millage rate. We've been talking about 6.25. Can anyone guess what South Daytona's proposed millage rate is?
7.7.
Yeah, 7 something.
7.75. 1.5 points higher than us. We have $50 million more assessed value, yet they collect $900,000 more in ad valorem taxes. I'm sure our finance director would like to have $900,000 to do some of these things. My point is that we have goals, there's costs associated with the goals, and rather than I just don't want us to do a knee-jerk reaction and go, okay, we have $87,000 savings, let's take it from 6.25 to 6.1875, whatever the number is, and then fall short of some of our goals, because one goal, my most common complaint that I have from our citizens is how the city looks, code enforcement. And we get the code enforcement reports every week that Joe sends out to us, and that department is busy now, guys. I don't know if you look at those. They are busy. And I think most of the complaints are coming into compliance. They're not going to special master, so that's a good thing. That means they're getting the notice and they're cleaning up. And I made a statement at the last budget workshop that I would rather be known for the code enforcement of Palm Coast than the speed limits of either Ponce Inlet or Daytona Beach Shores. And I think long-term, to increase the tax base and increase the conditions of our neighborhood and of our business community, strong code enforcement through a painting program where we can get your attention over here, but help you with the carrot over here to come into compliance is a win-win for our community. And so I would go as bold as to take that 85 or whatever the real number is and hire another code enforcement person. We have a department of 2 in 4 square miles, and they're doing a heck of a job. If we hired one more guy as good as them, it's half again. And maybe the economy of scales is that maybe it's 75% more workload than 50% more workload because they're working together as a team. So that's just me doing a gut check thinking, okay, I'm not saying that we should increase our millage rate because we can't above the 6.25. But a lot of these goals here, and we'll get to them, the parks, the condition of the parks, and this commission committed to the parks a couple years ago, and they're much better than they were. I just don't want us to cut some of that good progress we've had going for $83,000 or whatever the number is. So that's my just soapbox.
No,
Mental health for me and trying to
You
put
went
it in
from 80, you
put it
went
in
from 89 to 87 to 83. Where you-
I don't know what the
you're
real
going-
number
you're
is.
going back.
I don't know what the real number is.
It was 89 to start with.
yeah. No. Thank
So-
you, John, and very impassioned. And I definitely understand
Yeah.
exactly where you're coming from. And you know, I just always think most ideas aren't bad ideas. So I see where you're coming from. It's not a bad idea. So you would be in favor of staying at 6.25 mils?
I am, and I'm an insurance agent. I'm a fatalist. I always plan for the worst. 90% of the time it doesn't happen. That's how insurance companies make money.
Right.
But God forbid something breaks and we need some capital expense or something happens and that little bit of money though, it might be enticing to play with the number and make it 6.1, whatever the number is, you know, anything below the 6.25 is that, and then when you extrapolate that down to the average homeowner and it's $1.17 a year,
A month.
does that make any sense? And I would rather have a little bit of cushion because I know the department heads have cut this to the bone. And some of those other cuts that Joe had talked about and we had talked about in private were like unreasonable. You know, the one thing I'm worried about is that we see the condition of our grounds of US 1. We spent so much money and so many grants, and we haven't had prisoners for 5 months, and you can tell the difference. Our guys are doing it, but they're doing it with a shoestring workforce, and they don't have as much time to do it. When you got 48 hours a day of manpower out there, and we got 48 hours a month to commit to it, I'm fearful that that program may never come back, and we may have to pay a real landscaper additional funds to just keep it in the same condition it is. So that's just me being a worrywart, and hopefully it doesn't happen, and hopefully COVID goes away and the prisoners come back and it's all blue skies.
Right.
But that's what I worry about.
I appreciate that. Yes, Commissioner Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
I also agree with many of the things that you said, Commissioner Penny. My concern is some of the same as yours. However, I have to look at our decreased revenues and wonder if as usual, they got the numbers wrong. Or it's really a guesstimate at this point. It could be a lot worse than what we think it is. So for that reason, and some of what you stated, I just feel that our department heads, I really can't find anywhere in there that I would cut if I was a department head looking to cut something. And some of the recent lists I got of cuts that were kind of out there are almost impossible. Because if you cut some of those items, or most of those items I was sent in this email, you can't do your jobs properly. So to me, that's not a cut that should even be considered. I'd question Mr. Forte, why did you even send this out? This is ridiculous. He said, exactly, we can't function if you make these cuts. That's my point to you. And I get it. I really do. I get it. Because I was in your shoes at one time. And I just wouldn't feel safe. I wouldn't feel comfortable. My constituents wouldn't feel as though we were properly governing and being fiscally responsible. I don't look at the 6.25 as an increase because it's really not. It technically is only because we're getting a few more dollars. But that's where we're at now. That's where we're going to need to be. And I just don't look at any numbers that fall below that as working because, I mean, you got $89,000 that we say that we can save. But what if the numbers come in 5% lower for revenue than what's projected? We all know projections, especially from the state, sorry if anybody's listening from the state, are usually wrong. And they usually don't benefit us on the wrong side. So I'm really concerned about that. And I don't know how long COVID's going to last. Nobody knows how long COVID's going to last. So my fear is that number is going to go down for revenue. And I think we need to be prepared for that. Because I certainly want to maintain code enforcement. I would like to make it better, but you can only expect two people, like you said, to do so much work. So if we need to, at some point, I'll talk about a third position. But that's just going to be my point, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I
Commissioner
don't
Johnson,
think,
he raised his
Oh,
hand
I'm
first.
sorry.
Commissioner,
no, go ahead.
whoever wants the floor.
Yeah, I'll clean
A
up.
couple of things. I look at it kind of from a business point of view, and to me, it looks like usually I try to figure if you need to hire somebody if you're paying out month-long overtime to other employees to keep up the pace. Now, we're not doing much overtime, are we, Joe?
Not in code enforcement.
Definitely not in code enforcement. We've modified their schedule. They actually come in on Saturday. They switch their days around. But you talking just code enforcement?
Yeah, so if you need to hire someone, usually you need to hire them for a position because you're paying so much overtime to other people's offices.
Well, it's a little different, Commissioner, between, say, a public works overtime, and that's something that absolutely has to get fixed, or law enforcement has to fill a shift, or the water department. But in code enforcement, they work 40 hours. And all that means is there's more work when they come back the next day. So the city still suffers from code violations. We've gotten a lot of compliance in the last couple of years. And there's a lot of properties that have been cited by the special master and that are still not in compliance. And we often get repeat complaints. But once they've gone to the special master and they're getting their daily fines, there's not much more we can do about it. Code enforcement really is a voluntary compliance issue. Can we use more code enforcement? I think you could always use more code enforcement, but it's not an overtime demand driven.
Not to compensate for overtime.
Right, it's not an overtime demand issue.
And another thing is too, I pay a lot of taxes, so I try to keep an eye on it. And, to me is, if I'm paying 6.25% on whatever the property value is that I have this year, if I I don't get an increase on that 6.25 or an increase on property value, why would I be paying more taxes? I'm not actually paying more taxes. If we reduce the millage rate down to 6, then I would actually get a tax reduction on my property. Is that what the property tax?
It depends on your values. If your property value,
If it stays the same,
if your property value stays flat, then no, you would not see an increase.
if it stays the same, I don't know why they go out and increase your property value when you're in such hard times and the way things are going, and unemployment and all that stuff and all. But to me, that's the way I would look at it. If the actual 6.25, staying at that, you're actually getting more money in revenue to the city than you did last year, but you're not actually increasing people's amount of taxes they're paying on the property, unless the property appraisal raises the value of the property.
I thought there was an
No.
automatic 3% or something.
That's the cap.
No, that's the cap of what your homestead property can, if you have a homestead exemption.
Okay, so there's a chance it doesn't go up at all?
If you buy a property
No.
and put a 30-year mortgage on it, if they increase the property value 3% every year, by the time you get the house paid off, you've got your property tax on it, the way you look at it.
The only thing, though, Commissioner, is I don't know of any properties in our city that aren't necessarily going up. Unless you're going to tear down a building, for the majority of our properties, all the values are going to go up. You should have received in the mail, you should receive a preliminary tax bill and where all of the numbers are, and it'll tell you what your valuation is. Luckily for me, my house went up like $30,000 this year, but luckily, due to what you're saying, the homestead exemption, it only goes up 3%. So I'm only paying if we stayed at the current rate, I would only pay that 3% extra on my tax bill. But if I didn't have the homestead exemption, or if you rent a house, or if you're a business owner, those people cannot have homestead exemptions. And you can only have homestead exemption on one house. So if you have any snowbirds living here, more than likely, they'll probably not have their homestead exemption here. So those people will see tax increases.
Don't put a pool in, Mr. Mayor, because that kills the 3%.
Oh, really?
It goes up 50 grand.
That's not covered in the 3%?
Charging 6.25% on a $1 million house, or $1 million business or something like that, 6.25%. If it's not the CRA, how much does the city get out of it? How much percent of that do you think the city would get out of it?
Depends on the valuation.
6.25%.
No, I don't, that's in a whole nother formula, figuring out what the base year is and subtracting out the CRA.
Unless it's in CRA.
Yeah, I mean, we can tell you,
Didn't our values go up like 5.5 citywide? 5.5, 5.9?
Something around there. I think it was it 6%, Stella? Do you know? Off the top of your head?
we can
Okay.
subtract out the total millage minus the CRA monies and get a general fund millage.
But actually, if you didn't have a CRA, and you charge 6.25% on $1 million property, or $100,000 property, whatever it is, how much would you get for that to the city? You wouldn't give 6.25% tax right to the city. You have a lot of other things comes out of that,
No. That is directly to us. That would come to us in ad valorem. So,
what the city actually gets.
right,
Okay.
that'll be
So,
exactly
in the
what the
proposed
city.
tax
We
bill,
would
And
get
then you're-
95% of that because you anticipate
budget.
people are going to pay it early
Right.
and get that 5% savings.
So that's why you budget 95% of the ad valorem. But but there's more to that ad valorem. So ours is just 6.25, and then it's added to all of the other taxing authorities. So the hospital, the county, all of the different taxing districts. So those monies are the ones you're talking about that will go to those agencies.
It's about 22 to 24,
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
I pay like $1,000 a month on my shop out there, so the city, Holly Hill actually gets that $1,000 a month.
No,
No.
If that's your tax bill, then we would get whatever
You got
our
St.
millage of that
John's, you
is.
got-
We get a fourth of
You got all
that.
these other things.
Comes out of it, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
we get about a quarter of your taxes.
All right.
But the city runs on about a third, our budget runs a third or so of the monies that come in ad valorem. Is that correct? About a third?
What do you mean?
Like our budget is set so that about a third of it is filled with
What is
ad
your
valorem
address up
taxes.
there, Roy?
Isn't that right?
What is the
Stella?
address up
Is that
there?
right?
1137.
I don't believe so. I think you're
On our-
talking about where our reserves are, where we like to keep our reserves.
I thought on that pie, it was about 36%, 37% was the ad valorem taxes.
Oh, that go to pay for the
the city
budget,
budget.
for the full budget.
Correct.
It's not the only way we bring in money. So we bring in money through plethora of different ways. So the millage rate isn't the only way we bring in.
No, I know,
So
but that is, our taxes are about a third, right?
the ad valorem makes
Right.
up about a third.
Right.
The city couldn't survive off the ad valorem tax.
But I'm trying
No, no,
to
no.
get his property specifically.
I know
He's only
that you
paying,
don't get that full
only paying
And there used to be someone that sat in your seat right there, Mr. Danio, that wanted to go to a zero. You remember that when you were mayor, a zero millage rate, and would argue that every single year. You remember that, John, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Well, I get the feeling that these guys don't want to cut their own grass. That's the kind of feeling I get right there.
You might be
Do
right.
you-
No, I was just gonna say, I kind of feel like, you know, when you're talking about reallocating, it's kind of like we're kind of borrowing maybe a little from Peter to pay Paul, and I'm afraid the same thing's gonna happen, like, the other two commissioners are, do we want to take our chances and move it over and then find out we're on the short end or something? And, you know, I mean, I thought that we were pretty comfortable with Stellar's hard work and staff about where we were at before, you know, to pretty much keep things the way they were.
We
And
just
then-
lucked out with that Florida healthcare.
And that's what I'm saying, and that kind of would be a little bit of a bonus that we could reallocate to some of these other things that we're talking about. I mean, you know,
But I mean, my point is, I just think that you actually, it's strictly, I think it's up to the property appraiser, how much tax it would be to look at it. If you stay at 6.4% and the property appraiser leaves it wrong, then they pay the same thing they did last year.
well, you almost want your property to go up in value.
It's my opinion that the property appraiser is not valuing our properties high enough. If the property appraiser would increase the values of our properties, our millage would surely go down.
That's the South Daytona illustration right there. We have $50 million more in assessed values.
So, you know, you look at some of these homes, you know, you can't buy a home in the city of Holly Hill for less than probably 140, 150,000. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of homes. First of all, we have a lot of homes that pay very little taxes because of their assessed value, minus their homestead, minus their senior homestead. They pay very little. If you remember back when we were talking about one of the things the state was going to do, was it a year or two ago? And they showed how Ponce Inlet was going to pay, 90% of their residents were going to pay more in taxes, and 90% of Holly Hill would pay less in taxes because they didn't make that $100,000 threshold. Remember that? So 90% of our homes are below $100,000 assessed value. That's crazy. How,
But you can't buy them for under,
yeah, you can't buy and sell it for that price.
Market value and the appraised value, the property value on the, as far as the tax collector is concerned, is a total different thing.
always,
The rule of thumb was generally it was 80%.
yeah.
But now I can tell you what I've looked
Now
at,
it's probably 40%.
it's significantly less. So we're not collecting the amount of tax revenue for the millage that we're charging. If our homes were assessed, if our properties were assessed a little bit more accurately, we would collect more money.
Well, that's like Ormond Beach. Theirs is like 4 point.
That's exactly.
All right. I forgot whose floor it was. I think it was yours.
No, go ahead.
I was talking about the millage rate, but I'll let John see what he has to say.
No, I pretty much said what I had to say, I think.
And, you know, as you pointed out, Joe, a lot of that burden for our millage rate then falls upon our business community and the people that do not have homestead exemptions. So, you know, look, there's nobody up here that's going to be wrong. It's how we all budget, how we all think. I came into this position wanting to not raise taxes if at any possible way for me to do that, and I made those promises to citizens, and I'm going to stand on that. I agree, Commissioner Curry, that that the cuts that were sent out by our department heads, although I appreciate your work, I'm sure it took you some time to go back through the budget. They were, for the most part, unacceptable, impossible whatever verbiage you want to use. There's no way I would take away ammunition from your guys, chief, for training or tasers. There's just no way. That's just an uncuttable. And so when I received that list as well, there was maybe, I think one item that I ended up keeping on there, and it didn't have anything to do with our department's level of service at all. And so I went through the budget line by line and with Mr. Forte very, very closely. And, you know, the $55,000 of savings of health insurance is a great savings that we budgeted for, you know, the increase last year. And so now we can have that savings. And I would still be in favor of that. Also, the $34,000 that Mr. Forte spoke of earlier, that gets us to about $90,000. And then there are about $150,000 of other places that I would look to actually curtail, that would not curtail any services or any actual direct impact to our citizens or business owners. And so, you know, my stance is still going to stay the same. And, you know, being up here, I hear definite 6.25 from this side, and I hear, I think, 6.25 from this side, meaning staying at the current rate, so not raise.
Not to interrupt, but you just said 150,000 something that wouldn't affect?
Right.
I'd be interested in hearing that.
That's what I was
Sorry.
wondering.
I can go through that. I can go through it. It's just, I hear that, you know, and I think John Penny said it the right way, is I can tell you these savings, but do you subscribe to the theory? And rightfully so, Mr. Vice Mayor, that wants to create another job, and I think you said yes. If so, then these savings that I'm going to point out really don't go far.
Well, I said I would entertain.
Okay, I'll go line by line. So, starting out, what I would propose, and these are my proposals. I'm going to go through the whole entire list. You can write them down as I go, and then if you have any questions about them, if you agree with them, then let's talk about them. If you disagree with them, we can move on. First off, on page 8 in our commission budget, I would look to.
Can you go to the previous meeting workshop, not the workshop, where we did the budget discussion, and pull up the document so that when the mayor says page 8, I can pull page 8 up on the board? I'm looking for the July 28th meeting. So kind of seeing what.
Well, and we could pull them up, but I'll just go through them, and then if we have questions, we'll go back to that.
Yeah, we'll work
that
on getting
item.
that as you go.
So from the commission budget, training and education, is there anyone here that wishes to go to EMO or additional training this year that's not our annual Florida League of Cities? I know that Penny Curry and I have graduated out from the EMO classes, but we have $4,000 in there. I believe we've only spent about $1,000 this year. I think we could reduce that. We could definitely save $2,500 there, and I would be in favor of that. In the executive budget, there are executive other services of $3,000 that I would look to cut. There is miscellaneous event expense that we could have a savings of about $1,000. Right now, I think it's budgeted at $1,500. Employee appreciation, we have budgeted $5,000, and I believe there was an error in the budget, not reporting 2018, that we only spent $800.
It was paid by credit card and charged to the wrong department.
Correct. So that's definitely a place that we could end up cutting or considering. I don't think we will need to, and it's one of the last items that I would like to do. But if push comes to shove, it's something that I would rather not raise taxes to keep $5,000 in there for that. Now, page 11, the executive professional services, we can lower that budget down about $10,000 to $20,000, looking at previous years of how much we use.
What amount did you say?
10 to 20,000.
10 to 20,000?
Yeah, there's 100,000 budgeted.
I'm sorry, Mayor, what was that item?
That's basically, Scott, it's professional services. It's in your, we talked about it. You agreed that we could definitely cut that by $20,000 in there. Grant writer, we have a position in finance for a grant writer. That is $67,000 that we haven't taken advantage of, haven't hired, haven't put out for it. And we have that moving forward still in this budget, $67,000. So I would look to cut that.
Wait, Mr. Mayor, it's been my experience with grant writer, if we just take Steve Younks, for example, and look at his salary, grant writers typically produce 3 to 10 times their salary in grant writing. So
Correct.
I would not want to even entertain.
Well, let-
So you
let
would
me
like to
just-
hire that this year? We don't actually pay it. What we do is we have it in the budget, we haven't hired it. And so we actually haven't used it, and we don't plan on using it, other than maybe, and I talked to Joe about it, possibly switching that over to a different person in finance being hired. And that's full well and good, but in this budget, I don't want to look to do that right now.
I'm just thinking of when FEMA finally tells us no, and they're not going to reimburse us for any of our docks or our seawalls or anything like that, we're going to need a grant, we're going to need to hire a professional to help us with that.
Okay.
So that's.
Can we hire somebody on a commission base? If you're saying they get 3 to 10 times?
Right, you can.
You typically don't.
But you can. I would love, I've been talking to Joe for years, I would love to hire a grant writer. The problem with that is you say you get 10%. Well, they bring us in $2 million grant or whatever, which they won't, but if they did, now you're paying someone $200,000 for, 2 weeks of work or whatever it is, a month of work. So I understand that, but at the same time with this, so, and I really don't want to get into a back and
Okay.
forth.
No, no,
about it,
that's
but
fine.
And that can be something that you keep in there because you do have a valid
Yeah.
point of keeping that. Let's see. Sorry, I have a ton of notes everywhere. There's a lot of things that I scratched through, by the way, after talking to Joe. And then there is another $11,000 in savings from 1,000 here, 2,000 here, of looking at actuals and then seeing what needs to come out, what could possibly be over budgeted in some areas, and it's a very small amount, and I don't blame any person as a department head to think, what if this extra charge comes up, and to plan those, and those are estimates. And so I believe we could cut those back, and if I believe we'd be okay there. So with all that said, that it comes out to $148,000 over the $55,000 of insurance savings for a total of $203,000 just in the general budget, not looking at CRA or anything else. So those are where I would, Commissioner Curry, since you asked, that's where I would ask. But like I said before, that this is a commission. I have one vote. And my one vote, and I don't have veto power, and it's the commission's will. And I hear John Penny loud and clear, and I don't say you're wrong on your way of thinking of maybe we do hire 2 other people, maybe we hire a grant writer, maybe we hire someone in code enforcement, and there's all those savings are gone. So I fully understand that, and if that's the will of this commission, that's the way we'll live on it. But I just want to make it clear that I did do the hard work, I buttoned down, and it's once again, I don't question anyone's motives up here. I think, John, you've done a great job to think about this and put the time and thought process into this. And I think that you're doing what you think is best for the city 100% and what you promised in all of your campaigns, just as everyone else up here did. What I am saying is I look at the pandemic, I look at the people that are out of work, I look at the $30 a year extra in taxes. That doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people, and we're blessed to be able to say that. But you can't say that, as I said, to the lady that got her water cut off and that couldn't turn it back on over $30. You can't say that to people that are struggling, and it's one night out a week, but maybe that family doesn't have one night out a week, and it's bigger than that. It's not just the everyday citizen. It's not just the people that are struggling, that are our residents that may be out of work right now due to this worldwide pandemic, but it's the business owners that our millage rate actually falls on. Mr. Penny and Mr. Johnson, you both have been so blessed in life and worked so hard and earned your way in a recession-proof, basically, business. I'm not as fortunate. My business is destroyed. I haven't brought in any revenue since this pandemic began due to schools closing and me not being able to fundraise. So I feel the pain. I feel the stretch. And, you know, thank God that I didn't go out and I didn't rent a business along US 1. Thank God I didn't do that, because I would be in a world of hurt. And there's people out there that, in my own family, I have a family member who rents several houses. It's basically their retirement. And they're not rich by any means. Net worth may be nice, but actual money, they count on those rentals every day. And there's 2 people that haven't paid in almost 6 months, and he hasn't been able to kick them out, to get new renters in there to be able to pay that. And now we're going to stick them with a tax bill that's higher, that they don't have the homestead exemption. They don't have the 3%, right? And guess what? They have to pay it. They don't have a choice, or big bad government's going to come knock on their door and they're going to say, give me your tax bill. And so those are some of just a few little anecdotal reasons why I feel the way I feel. And I don't want it to be about anything else. Like I said, I have my one vote. And as you stated earlier, there's a lot of different taxing organizations. We get 25% roughly of that millage rate come to us. We can't control all of those other places. If it's $30 an increase for us, it may be $30 from the taxing authorities. It may be $30 from the county. I can't control any of those. We can't. But what we can control is our millage. And the only thing I can control is my vote. And so for those reasons, that's why I will not vote for 6.25. And that's all I will say on the subject. So, yes. Thanks, Mayor.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, and like you said, we all have done a lot of research and have different opinions. That's what makes this world great, right? We're not up here just rubber stamping anything.
Right.
But when I first ran for office, I had 2 goals. To get people to change their perception when I said I lived in Holly Hill, and to get an ice cream shop on US 1. So we don't have an ice cream shop. But
Halfway there, right?
10 years ago, you would.
But I have to tell you that our perception is changing, and we all sit here and say how great it is, but we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. And I've been spending some lunches over at Pickleball in the kitchen and having lunch. And it's a very eclectic group over there. And a conversation that I've been privileged to more than once, because it's a small place and you can hear, is this is a beautiful place, but why did they put it in Holly Hill? And that cuts to my core. And so that's why I'm so passionate about taking the savings and doing something with it. And 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people can look at our community, because it's going to take that long, through constant little drips. You know, that's how the Grand Canyon was formed, one drip at a time. And that's how I look at it. And I know we all want that as a goal, but I just have a different perception and a different way of looking
How we
at
get
it.
there.
And so
That's all it is what
Yeah,
lane do we
right,
take?
right.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Penny? Curry?
Yes, I hear everybody up here. My fear is that maybe we're not hearing ourselves sometimes. But I honestly don't know how. I mean, some of these things, I have no idea what they are that you're talking about cutting, but we've already seen proof positive that there's nothing that can be cut, or else these things that you talk about, the department heads would have already cut instead of giving some of, and I don't mean to say y'all's responses are ridiculous, but they're ridiculous in concept that they really can't be cut. So if they're willing to put these items on there saying, look, commission, you don't want to do 6.25, these are the things that we have to offer to cut. Is it going to hurt? Yes, it's going to hurt, but here's your suggested list. So I don't know where all these things come from. I thought we were going to get a little more into detail, but that's okay. because I don't think we're ever going to get to the point to where we're going to agree, I guess. I was kind of hopeful and giving me the opportunity to kind of lead me down a path that I wasn't sure if I wanted to go, but I was willing to listen and willing to go along. I have never, ever, ever, ever made a campaign promise that I'm not going to raise taxes, because I couldn't do that. I can't make promises to people that I don't know if I can keep. How am I supposed to say I'm not going to cut taxes, or I'm not going to raise taxes, when it's either I keep your taxes at 6.25 where you're at right now, you might have to pay a few extra dollars or buck something, whatever it works out to be, a month. And a lot of the people aren't even going to have to pay anything extra, because like Mr. Forte said, our numbers, I went through some numbers with him this morning, and it's ridiculous what our property appraiser does to us, but we can't do anything about that at this meeting. I would certainly hope all of us would take the opportunity to talk to him when we found the time, because I think that's needed. But I don't know how I can sit there and justify, okay, I'm going to give you a tax reduction to 5.9, 5.8, whatever number it is that you're looking at, because I really don't know. Or I can keep you at the same that you're at, 6.25, and I can make your services just as good, if not slightly better, than what you're receiving now. I understand we have people struggling in COVID. All of us have been hit one way or another, our families, our children, you know, whatever the case is. We have all been impacted in one way or another. And I understand that you want to take a stance of not doing a tax increase, but we really have to look at this realistically. Do we do 6.25 and now we're able to provide those services that we've provided, and we're okay if the state comes back and says, well, I'm sorry, we made a little bit of an error, you're actually not getting that amount, you're getting this lower amount instead. So we would be okay with that. So that's how I justify it to my constituents. And I have been on this commission for quite a long time. Of course, this man to my right's been on a bit longer than I have, but I'm getting ready to serve my 5th term, Mayor, and I listen to the people. I listen to what the people have to say. They're always communicating with me. And not one time have I heard anybody say, you need to lower our taxes. We're tired of paying so many taxes in Holly Hill. Wow. People don't have that discussion with me. People have the discussion with me, we want our city looking better. We want people to have a positive thought. I just had a conversation with one of our residents the other day that said, you know, our city is looking so much better since I moved here 10 years ago. I'm actually proud of my city and the way it looks and in the direction it's going. Yes, we have a lot more to do, but I love the direction we're going. And I get really sick and tired of when people ask me where I live and I tell them Holly Hill, that I get that strange look. She said, I'm getting really sick of that. She said, because we live in a very nice city, a city that has improved tremendously over the last 10 years, and I would like to see it continue. Those are the sentiments that I get from my constituents and my, you know, the business owners that I deal with. It's not lower my taxes, and I don't care if you have to take services away. I have never heard that. So that's, you're right. You're probably not going to be able to change some of our minds up here to leave 6.25. I don't know what millage rate you're trying to get to. I was kind of hopeful that you'd give me a little more detail as to what you're wanting to cut, but I'm going to have to say that most likely I'm going to stick to my original motion of the 6.25, Mayor. But I do appreciate the information that you gave us.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does anyone else have any comments before we move on? Yeah.
Just real quick, I'm not going to go into a lengthy conversation. If there was a question of motives I apologize, because that last time, I mean, it's not, I think that we all should be questioning our motives, because we are responsible to the city to a certain extent. So, I mean, maybe it's a bad choice of words, maybe you heard differently or something, but, you know, everybody has a passion, and, you know, so I just want to clear that up, okay,
yeah.
we are all moving in the same direction, maybe, or we're trying to get to the same place, maybe we're going at it in different directions, maybe, but, you know, and I'm kind of the rookie up here, so I'm going to rely on staff, their recommendation, their hard work. You know, you put some time and effort into it. You know, do I want to put my faith in you as the mayor, or do I want to put my faith in the professionals that cut the budget to where I would feel comfortable? I would sure hate to go and say, well, you know, I'm going to side with the mayor and find out the hard way that just didn't work. Employee Appreciation Day. I run a business. The worst thing I can do is tell my people, you can't eat. That would destroy morale, because every time I went to the bathroom, they'd be eating stuff. So, I mean, there's ways of, you know, it's like, I just don't think that would be one of the things to do it. So there's a few things that I heard I just don't think would make any sense. Some of the bigger ones, I really don't know how you came up with that, because I thought if it's that much money, they had to come up with it. But I'm going to stick on what they told me, and hopefully we're going to be okay, so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Johnson?
I don't think we have to make the decision today, but because I think we have until September to make it.
Right.
But, I pay a lot of taxes, and I don't want to pay a lot of taxes. I'd love to reduce it way down, but there was a big property owner and a big businessman in Holly Hill told me when I first moved here back in the 60s, he said, one thing you got to remember now, and Robin knows what I'm talking about but that was Bob Casada, actually, Bob Special Show. He said, you're going to get what you pay for. No matter what it is. He said, if you're not willing to pay for it, you're not going to get it. He said, so that's why he got so successful. And then he gave the people everything in his carnival show and every game he did, he gave them a value so they would pay more for it or something. So he was real successful doing that. And I think that was good. But the main thing is, we don't have to make the decision just yet. We have to look at it like, do we need it? We don't want to cut ourselves short. You know, we need to make sure that we have enough service to keep up the level of what the goals we're trying to gain right now, like with the pickleball, the new billiard place on Center Street and all, and everything is, a lot of things increase in the city, make it look good. And we're going to need more services for it all. Not a lot more services, but we'll also get more taxes from them businesses as well. So, and we're putting things more properly on the tax roll. So I just think it's going to be hard to do it, but we just still need to look at every possibility to see if it's something you can cut without hurting.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Before we move on, there's just a couple of things that I'd like to address, just because I feel I have to. You said it best, that we probably won't agree, probably won't get you lower off of a 6.25, but with all due respect, I did give you what you asked, and for you to say that I didn't give you, or
I'm
not in
talking
enough
about
detail.
what
and I'll
these
go,
items were.
let's take it one by one. I'll gladly do it now, later. I don't think we're going to agree, and so that we could waste more time and do that, but I'm happy to go through it. And so the insinuation that I didn't do that, with the amount of hours that I put in, that Mr. Forte knows, and sat with him, take a little bit of offense to.
I am not
That's
trying
okay.
to make an innuendation about
That's okay.
anything, anybody.
I'll continue on.
I'm just,
And I only make a promise that I will keep. And I'm surprised that you haven't heard from anyone that they want to raise tax. They don't want you to raise your taxes, because I hear it all the time. And so maybe we just talk to different constituents or a different base, but that's okay. It's why you're elected. It's why you're up here, and that's okay to disagree, and it's okay for me to disagree.
Absolutely.
And as stated before, a couple people said, we all want to get to the same place, different roads. So that's why I'm taking that different road. And the only other thing that I may just want to say to you, and I take no offense to what you said last meeting at all, but put your faith in you. it's not a matter of putting your faith in me. Don't put your faith in staff. Don't put your faith in me. Don't put your faith in staff. Put your faith in you.
Well, I put my faith in God first and foremost.
Well, when you're talking of faith,
Yeah.
I mean when it comes to city business. Your job as a commissioner is to look at what staff gives us. They are professionals that we hire for a lot of money if you look at their salaries, rightfully so. They give us expert opinions. Experts can sometimes be wrong. I laid out a list of things, and by the way, employee appreciation, I don't want to cut that. It would be the very last thing on this whole entire list. It's a couple $1,000s. But if you go through the list, you'll find that those thousands add up in different places. So don't put your faith in me. Don't put your faith in them. You do the work. You look at it. You do it. Nobody else. That's why you're elected. 12,000 people you represent. And that's all I'll say. Unless there's any additions, we can keep talking about the budget and millage, but I think that we're all pretty set in stone. The only further thing that we may need to talk about, and I'm on the losing side of this, is where we need to give direction to Mr. Forte for where we do want to use the extra money from the $55,000 along with the $34,000 of about $80,000. I don't know if we want to discuss that note now, Joe, if you have ideas, or if you have an idea. I know your idea was to hire code enforcement, which would...
Mr. Mayor, I do have an idea.
Yeah.
I would prefer, and I don't know how everybody else up here feels, I would prefer holding tight on that money till we actually get some hard numbers from the state of Florida as to what our revenues are going to do, because I'm telling you, I really feel strongly that it's going to come back much less than what they've told us.
Okay. So
I think we
So
should
you
just hold
don't
tight
want to
on
give
that.
direction to start looking to maybe possibly hire an extra code enforcement officer? Mr. Forte, do we need another code enforcement officer? I know we could probably do with a lot of extra employees, but in your opinion, when looking at the needs of the city and that would increase services, which I think is what you're going for, in the most dramatic way, would that be where your opinion would be to hire?
It all depends on the standard that you as a commission want to set. If you want to see more code enforcement, we hire a code officer. If you're satisfied with the code enforcement you see, we stay status quo. If you want to see more traffic citations, I'll hire a police officer to issue tickets. So it's your standard that I try to impose. So it's really not my desire. And that's one of the things
Right.
Bill Arthur used to always credit me with is the commission doesn't do what I want. I
Right.
do what the commission wants.
That's right, but in your opinion of knowing where the needs are and what departments, I know that you had talked about possibility of finance needing another person, so.
What I'm going to tell you is I have a finance director who's only going to be with us for a little more than a year. And I have to figure out a succession plan for that replacement.
Right.
And it's my intention to bring somebody in here to do that. Somebody I'm going to hire is going to come in with the intention of moving into that seat. So I have to be able to have funds somewhere between now and the next, call it 6 to 9 months, where I'm going to have to double a position. I'm going to have to have two people in a position, because if Stella leaves and I don't have somebody waiting in the wings to take that spot, we're going
Not
to be in
if,
deep
when.
trouble.
When?
Not
Be a
if,
lap
when.
time, yeah.
When she leaves, we're going to have a problem if I don't have somebody to step in. Now, I can go the process like we did when we hired Stella and try to bring somebody in, but I'll tell you, the computer system that we deal with, if you're not familiar with Central Square and HTE, the learning curve is extremely difficult. And we still have, for the most part, a young department of personnel that aren't there to train or assist a new director. So it's real important to me that I find the right succession plan in replacing some of my department heads looking into the future. That would be my.
Well, then maybe I think what's prudent is, since there will be cost savings in this budget, to brainstorm on those ideas of things that we need more concrete, and we could talk about those at the
Right.
next meeting as well, because I know nobody's really had that much time. You said a couple hours that you had to think of where you wanted that direction to be, and so we can just come back to that. So if there's nothing further on the budget or millage, we're going to move on to our goal setting. If, Val, could you pull up the list on that?
The,
If
Overhead
they were
side-
working, we could.
these side machines aren't working right now.
Oh, okay.
They're waiting for
The
Scott.
storm?
Possibly.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you want us to scoot this way and you can go where Commissioner
No,
Curry is?
I'll break my neck.
You're gonna
We'll
get a
just
crick
go
in
one
your
by
neck, I'm
one.
just telling you.
Yeah.
From sitting in
Where
that
did we
seat
stop
before.
previously, Mr. Forte?
Well, I'll tell you where I need, whether we stop there or not, I'll tell you where I need more information. The last thing I have notes on is the extension of the CRA and moving forward with the time extension and potentially modifying the CRA boundaries. And we'll work with our economic development coordinator when he gets on board to start to put those things in motion. Again, that's not a one-year activity. It's an activity that should start now and plan to request or find out from the county what they're going to need from us to request an extension of the CRA time. So that leaves me at the, picking up at the, hold on a second. Okay, so that leads me at the drug task force. I don't remember if we talked about that.
Well, before we move on with the CRA, have we heard anything from the county of whether they're even going to entertain,
They have to.
entertain?
They have to entertain it. It's no different than somebody coming to the commission. They
Right.
have to listen to the ask. They don't have to
But
approve.
what I mean is do you have any guidance
When
of
Nick
if they're
was-
going to approve them or not, extensions? Because
When Nick was here, I had to make contact with the person in the county that would be his counterpart to start working through those details. Well, she left the county and Nick left the city. So we're back at scratch. But I can tell you my experience when I was in Seminole County, when a city wanted to renew or even begin a new CRA, the county nowadays, because of all the criticism with CRAs, they want very, very specific details. What are you going to do with the money? Because what we're doing with the money right now really isn't fulfilling the intention of CRAs and what their real purpose is. So they're going to come back and say, all right, if it ends in 2026 and we renew it and you're going to get X dollars from this point forward, tell me specifically what projects you are going to do, and we're going to agree to that or disagree with it. So they're going to want to see a full-blown plan, a true master plan, not some
right.
thing that's going to go on the shelf. So it's going to be a lot of work between now and then to produce a document to the county to show them what we're going to do with the money and then follow through with that.
Can, and maybe we need to have a separate workshop just on this, but can we continue in that plan? And I guess it's not going to suffice from what I'm hearing of $150,000 a year for $50,000 in a paint program, $100,000 in
They want to see
Structural.
significant.
so it has to be significant. Those things are ancillary. If the funds are there, we can promote them. So then I think the impetus would be on us to start searching projects. And so as we have this new economic director coming in, economic development coordinator, that needs to be extremely high on his list if it's not already, to search out businesses that want to grow and want an opportunity in a city like this to redevelop a property.
Well, it's things like property acquisition, taking substandard properties and joining them with other properties to make them now conforming.
Right.
It's creating regional stormwater projects where one business doesn't have to develop or buy more property simply for stormwater for their business. It's creating public parking areas because a lot of these substandard parcels don't have room for parking. So and I don't want to use the term walkable community because in this environment we can't be. We're just not conducive to it. But we can put in an area of parking that could accommodate several businesses within a 100 block. And those are the kind of things that, you know, if you look at Woodland Boulevard in DeLand or some of these other cities, they have their businesses on the road and the people park behind the businesses. We don't have that here. We have residential homes behind our businesses. So we have to look for ways to reinvent US 1 and use those monies to create a developable infill community. That's what we need to focus on.
So what is the time frame on this? I know that it runs out in 2026, but the time frame to actually get it reapproved for X amount of years, would that be 2026? I mean, are we that
No, we
far
want it done
out?
before then. Now, I don't know how soon before then we need to do it, because there's a whole taxing process that has to go into that, whether it continues or doesn't continue. So I would say we have a couple of years to get it done, but there's going to be a lot of work to do. We may have to hire a consultant to put together a whole nother master plan that's going to dictate how we move forward.
Well, and I don't want to say this is probably John Penny's comment, but being a fatalist, CRAs are under attack every single year in the legislature, and all it takes is 1 year for it to catch fire, and then it's out of our hands anyways, and this can't be extended until 2026, 6 years away. So
here's the
and
other
we could
thing.
get a new county council and a new
Right.
county manager that absolutely hates CRAs.
Right. Here's the other thing you need to remember. When we have 6 years left of the CRA, actually less than 6 years left of the CRA now. So we either have to move forward with coming up with a plan to continue it, or we have to figure out what the plan is going to be to not have it. So what that means is I've got law enforcement positions that are funded out of the CRA. I've got community development positions that are funded out of it. I've got some administration positions that are funded out of it. We have to find new revenue for that, because that revenue from all of the other taxing agencies go away. The money that the city puts into the CRA, because we contribute money into it as well, that comes back to the city, and it's a very small portion of it. Consider it, like everything else, probably 25% of the total. So whatever we're getting in the CRA total, we'll then get 25% of that back into the general fund that we can use. That then gets counted as a tax increase that year. Keep that in mind.
That what?
That gets counted as a tax increase that year
To who? What do you mean?
to the city. So
Right, we would have more into the
whatever
general
day
fund.
that CRA goes away and those monies get shifted into the general fund, that's a tax increase.
Well, the big winner is the county, because the
Well-
county's not receiving that money, and now the county's going to be the
All
big
of
winner.
the other tax
School and the
agencies,
hospital.
Right,
yeah, all of the other taxing agencies get their money back.
right.
So for them, it's a win, they get
Right.
new money. For us, it's a loss because we're losing that money.
Right.
So it's going to take quite a bit of real methodical, strategic thinking to figure out how we're going to move forward. And that's going to involve the community too. That's just not going to be,
So do we need any further direction for you on this, or?
no, I mean, right now the direction is to look to move forward with the time extension of the CRA. And now when Kevin gets on board, he'll be assigned that task. And like I said, he did it both on the county side in Seminole and he did it on the city side in New Smyrna Beach. So he's familiar with both sides. It's just a matter of finding out what the expectation is from the county and then being certain that we could meet that expectation.
Unless anyone objects to that being the strategy. Yes, Mr.
Uh, Do we just need to strike number 7 and say research possibilities to extend timeline of CRA? Because you got Blue Tide in there, set up a meeting. Those are very specific things.
Yeah, blue tide's got to come off.
I would just think it should say, research possibilities to extend CRA. Like, just keep it short and simple, and
Yeah.
it probably won't really start taking form for another year and a half anyways.
Right. Any objection to that?
I just feel like really, it's probably one of the most important goals we have on that list up there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the future of the city, the income of the city, how we get it. If we cut that, if we lose that, I think we're gonna be in a bottom.
Right.
Well, you could go, we have had painting grants and matching grants, facade grants. If you went to the county and said, we are going to reinvent our entire US 1 corridor with the use of styrofoam and stucco and just create a Walt Disney World-like experience when you go down, that's a goal. That's a potential use for it. I mean, rather than piecemealing it, you do a block at a time every year for the next 20 years, and boom, now you got, I mean, it's kind of a crazy idea, but
Well, it's not that crazy, because when you think of the number one thing that pops into my head is the motels.
Yeah.
And so, if there could be projects that could reinvent what those are.
I mean, look at
like
my office.
Your office, right. So, and that's not even tearing down the building, that's just a remodel. So, you know, but we got to have somebody step up and want to do that.
Top priority on everything is start on it soon, not wait.
Well, we need an investor. We need someone to come in with
Right.
that believes in us, our city as much as we believe in our city,
Right,
like the Martins.
right. That's exactly right. All right. All right, moving on. Joe, I'm just going to let you read it so I don't.
Well, which
Crack the neck.
document do you want to work off? Do you want to work off the previous year's document or the new list of items?
Wherever we left off at the last meeting, whatever else we needed to get through. I think we got through all of the previous, unless
Yeah.
you had any questions. If you have any questions or need more direction on any of the previous ones,
I was
Go to those
working off
first.
of the new list.
okay.
So where we're at on the new list is at Police Drug Task Force.
All right. This is something, you want me to talk about it? This is something that Joe and I had spoke about. And where it spurred from is the chief and Mr. Forte and I received an email a couple months back, and then just received one the other day as well, from a young man that works for, he's a law enforcement officer for the lifeguards, and he has a young family on somewhere off of Flomish, one of the dead-end streets. Beautiful street, actually. I looked at buying a house there years ago. And he has a 3 or 4-year-old son, and they played outside, and he found a baggie of drugs, and pretty bad drugs, and it was from the house next door. And apparently, from what I've learned, they are renting out room by room, and the city is aware and doing what we can. The police department is fully aware and doing what they can. It's just so tough, I think, on our law enforcement, especially these days, to have anything concrete to be able to go and shut them down. And if I'm wrong, say so, Chief. But so it's tough to just say, hey, we know there's a problem there, but how do we get rid of it, right? You have to have all this evidence before you move in. And so he sent me a picture of the baggie, and he's a law enforcement officer, so he disposed of it at his work. And then just a week or two ago, he emailed again, and he found a syringe right there in front of his house. And he has a 3-year-old kid playing in the front yard. Now, this is one anecdotal story, but we all know and we all get the same complaints that there's drug activity. It's on my street. It's down there. There's 100 cars a day that stop, and they do that. And so when we're talking about goals, and we talk about speeding, and we talk about issues that we have all heard about, one thing that I've heard about over and over is drugs. And so I floated the idea, and I don't know how good or bad it is. I haven't spoke with the chief about it yet, but I spoke with Mr. Forte that what if we had a specific drug task force? And even though we do have people committed to drugs, and we do have a county drug task force, maybe we be a little bit more public about it. Maybe we spread that word that we have created a so-called drug task force, and what that entails, you know, I haven't gone fully through, but sometimes that appearance of that may actually help as well. So, and so Ms. Forte and I talked about a number of ways to do that, and he can speak on that as well, but I don't know if it's something that you guys are hearing constantly, if it's something that we need to take a look at. So if anyone has any, Mr. Penn.
I hear the same things, and the timing of the drug deals and the transactions are so quick that we can't be all the places all the time.
Right.
So what I hear you saying, though, is when I first read it, I thought you were talking about, you know, going and hiring 5 police officers. But after listening to you, what I hear you saying is that maybe we take personnel and give them a new title,
Right.
and perception can be reality, and they still do the same jobs, but maybe they meet once a month and go to training about the latest, greatest drug, depression, or
Right.
things. Okay.
And coordinate with the county to do bigger drug busts and come in, and then as Chief Capri does, Daytona, and of course the sheriff, be public with it. Now, I will say that there is another side to that. If we come out and we say we caught 10 drug dealers today in Holly Hill, well,
got 10
now
drug
we're
dealers
saying
in
we
Holly
got, now we're saying, yeah, that there's drug dealers in Holly Hill. But I will counter with that to say that that perception is already there from a lot of people, that we have crime and that we have excess of that. And in fact, it was disheartening to hear at a Port Orange budget meeting just a week ago that people talked about Daytona and Holly Hill of how much crime they have and that they don't want their police department to become like us. And absolutely unfair, because if you look at the types of crimes that we have compared to other communities that are around us, our police departments do a great job. We have less crime. We have more petty crime. If we didn't have the Dollar Generals, probably wouldn't have near as much as that. And if everybody actually reported in a unified way across the board like Daytona and all these others, I think that we would come out a lot better. And even with that being said, we're still, when you look at the unified crime rates, we're still in the middle of the pack with Volusia County. So anyway, sorry, off my soapbox. Commissioner?
We all, I think, hear about the drug issues. We see, I get pictures emailed to me. It's been an issue. But I am not real sure, and Chief, you correct me if I'm wrong, do you have the personnel to put together a drug task force?
If you want to
If you
speak,
would,
yeah, come
please.
to the mic.
Because from my understanding, we're just sort of handling
Stephen
calls
Aldrich.
now.
You're asking if I have the personnel. Everybody's really allocated to what they're doing at this time. To be honest with you, if we were going to try to do something like that, it would almost have to be on an overtime basis. And, I'm sure I could get officers that would, volunteer, I'd say volunteer, but for overtime, work additional hours to target specific, drug investigations and such. But without the additional resources, that would be very difficult.
And how many people would you want to hire if maybe we were to do this? And I know, look, we're in an idea stage, so if anyone has ideas, throw them out.
Well, first of all, when you're asking how many people you would hire, the problem is you're saying about specific homes or something like that. We really have very few target home locations that I would say we could, that type
Focus
of
on.
operation would work. A lot of the other ones that you discussed are the ones that are drive-by. They get on the phone, they're walking down the street, they see our car, so hey, not this block, let's go to the next block. And those ones are very difficult because with cell phones, and obviously they can look around just as well as we can. If we can be where they can't see us, we have a chance, but otherwise, they just go around the corner, and for us to move our operations around to try to catch them on the next corner, it makes it very difficult. So when you're asking, off the fly, how many people that would take, you would have to, to actually put a little group together, you'd have to have 2 or 3 people because they have to work together and still utilize patrol officers. I mean, that's what we would normally do now is,
Patrol.
I have 1 or 2 folks that set up to try to see something going on, and they coordinate with the officers that are working to try to make stops and to identify people, and we work it from there. We do work with our officer that we have assigned to the task force. He's in town a lot, and he is our eyes and on Mark to set up and coordinate. But it does take time.
Is he with the sheriff's office, you mean?
He's our officer, but
Oh,
he
okay.
works on the county task force.
Okay,
But the house that you're talking about, we're working that.
right.
And, I can guess when I see 2 people in the front yard that, hey, there's a drug deal going on. It's not that simple. Obviously, with a lot of training and stuff like that and what they see, we run tags and we know who the players are. And when everything comes together, if we can do a search warrant, make an arrest, great. But that doesn't mean they don't get out shortly thereafter and we have them back in our communities. So it's,
Sadly,
it's a
that's true.
challenging thing that we're trying to work on. And, there are certain homes that there's multiple tenants that live in it. And it makes it very difficult because, each one of them can have people coming and going. If there's 4 individuals who live in a house and I have my friend over and you have your friend over, it certainly looks a lot busier. So we have to work through all those. But
Yeah.
You know,
Vice Mayor?
we're kind of brainstorming here, right? Like, in a
Yeah.
perfect world, this would be a great idea in a perfect world if money was no object, right?
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Chief, we apply annually, and I think for the last 2 or 3 years, we've successfully gotten the grant to help us with speeding. Is there, in a perfect world, there would be a grant out there that we could apply for
Good question.
and pay overtime for what the mayor's asking for with our current personnel? Does anything like that exist out there?
there's not a grant like that that I'm aware of at this time.
Okay,
Yeah, I've
The
never
the
heard of
grant
that.
you're talking about is specifically from
specifically,
from the Florida Department of Transportation. They have about 3 or 4 different grants they do specifically to address aggressive driving, speeding, bicyclists, a couple different other.
so the police fund that we apply for to get tasers and vests and those type of things,
Well-
the policemen's, what's that?
Those are specific. It's a bulletproof vest.
Right, bulletproof vest
That's
grant,
the
but there's
JAG
not a grant for.
Okay, the JAG grant. Okay, could we apply to a JAG grant and use it for things like this, or is it only for
Okay,
real
the JAG
property?
grant that we get, the
Right.
one that we're setting up to work on right now,
Right.
it's like $4,000 for the year.
Okay.
But in that line of questioning, does that come directly from the state, or is that from, I know the speeding grants are from FDOT, as you
Right.
stated, but is it a state program to have these other grants that are available for litany of other things? Is that just a state-run program?
The ones related to traffic and pedestrians and bicyclists, that's all through the FDOT,
FDOT.
which is the state.
Right.
The JAG grant is actually through, it's a federal grant, but like I said, it really gets you one little piece of
Right.
equipment. It will not pay
Okay.
for what you're asking for.
Right. Good question. You have any other questions?
That's
Greg?
it.
All right, you still have the floor. Thank you, Chief.
No problem.
Thank you, Chief.
You still have the floor.
Oh, I'm good now.
Yeah, and as I said, it's something to keep in mind. It's just an idea that I threw out. I didn't have much specifics on where we could go with it, but I just think it's something we should throw out and start having a conversation about.
Awesome
And so
idea
if
if we
anyone
have
has
the money.
ideas as we move forward on how to do that, then just keep it front in mind, because when we do talk about where we're going and where we all want to be, and in a perfect world, we want less crime, and especially drug activity, and so this is something that should be front of mind, and if there's a way that we can help our police department get there, and if it means additional funding, if we have a solidified way to go about things, then so be it. And then we discuss how well that service will be to our community. So just wanted to put it on there because I think it's a great goal, and it really should have said more something along the lines of decreasing drug activity. We need to have
That's a
ideas.
double-edged sword, though. Decreasing drug activity kind of means you really have a bad
Right.
drug problem.
Right.
Do we
That's
really
what I
have a
said
bad
earlier.
drug problem, or do we get an occasional complaint when you see the guy go through the car wash and the 2 cars pass and there's nothing? you can
Right, and they just say it, right.
Those quick hand-to-hands, it's almost impossible.
Yep.
I guess the question really is do we have any more or less of a drug problem than any other community around here?
Chief, can you give an answer to that in your professional opinion of do we or don't we have more or less of a drug problem of our general community?
To be quite honest, I think if you, I know our community. I know we have less of a drug issue, in my professional opinion, than Daytona Beach. But like with Ormond and stuff like that, it is difficult to tell. Yeah, we
'Cause
have
we're
a
different
couple Target
sizes.
houses,
Yeah.
but most of our stuff, like the drug dealers that we end up catching or deal with, usually come out of the Daytona Beach area. In all honesty, so as far as we have users in our
I was
community,
going to say, so more users than dealers.
that would be my
Yeah.
estimation.
Okay. All right, if anyone has any further, otherwise, we'll move to the next one. Mr. Forte?
So there's no action on that?
I just think that, I wanted to bring it up for discussion, that you have it front of mind. At this time, no, unless we have better ideas to actually form something like a drug task force, which is something I'll work on. And I think something that I'll look at other communities too, to see what they're doing and see if it can be replicated in some fashion or form. And if it's even worth going down due to success rates. So, Mr. Penny?
No, I think that's a great idea, Mr. Mayor. I want to caution us all. Let's don't put it as a goal if it's unattainable. It looks like
Right.
we don't have the funding to fund it now. It's a great idea. Let's keep it in the back of our brains, but don't put it as a goal, because if it's a goal and staff doesn't reach that goal, next year we're going to spank them on the head and say,
Right.
you didn't reach your goal. Well, you didn't give me any money, and you really, so that, let's,
It's an
I'm
unattainable
fine with,
goal.
I'm
Right.
fine with
Because of
striking.
funding.
I'm fine with striking that through. Unless someone else wants to keep it on. All right. Next item, Mr. Forte.
Okay, the next item is the Riverside Park, Second Street Park on the south side of Marina Grande. And the discussion on that is, some of you have been contacted with, or from some of the residents at Marina Grande, maybe the HOA members, maybe somebody might have been contacted by the majority owner. So the question that they have, and let me preface this conversation with some of the folks who were kind of difficult dealing with by email over the last several months have really done a fantastic job of helping to clean the park. Now, granted, they'll clean the park and they leave the branches out there on the side of the circle, and we've got to pick it up afterward, and sometimes you don't know about it in a timely fashion. But they've really done a great job in cleaning it. The city went in and they leveled out the front area where there was some homeless people living, and they recently put in bark mulch in there. And these other folks are out there and they're trimming the Brazilian pepper plants, which is an invasive plant, as you know, which keeps perpetuating itself. The problem with what they're doing is just what I said, they're trimming it, they're not removing it. So when you trim it and you leave a stump behind, that plant's going to grow back in a year and look just like it did yesterday. So until it's eradicated and removed, those Brazilian pepper plants just keep coming back. They're very, very difficult to deal with. But they are doing a great job at getting it cleaned up. So the thought from them was that they want the city to go to the state of Florida and request that the state of Florida, and this is the TIF, the Trust of Internal Improvement Trust Fund, that owns the property that the park is sitting on. They want us to go to the trust and ask them to release the property so that it can be sold to, given to, allowed to be maintained by the Marina Grande folks, meaning it would no longer be a public park. Some conversations was that they would purchase that park for whatever dollars the city may or may not have in it, in exchange for them purchasing another piece of property that they would give to us. But then there's, we haven't gotten into this discussion of who's going to develop that property into a park. So before I go and contact the state to even ask a question, which I think would be met with great resistance of them releasing that park for private purpose, I want to get your opinion as to what it is you would like us to do.
Thank you, Joe. Does anybody have any comments? Yes.
well, I'm one of those people that has been contacted by members of the HOA. And my wife and I toured the park this past Sunday. We went on a long walk, and it's amazing that the citizens brought it to the city's attention. The city had limited resources, and we did what we could, and they did what they could, and it's amazing. I know your wedding was down there, Mr. Mayor, and it's beautiful. It got to a state where it was terrible. The underbrush was just unmanageable, and it's gorgeous. You can stand on the river and see Riverside Drive now. It's that clear all the way through. But when I was approached, she's like, hey, you should give us that park. It's like, no, it's not our park to give you. That's the citizens' park. And the developer put a lot of money in there. The city put a lot of money in there. But it is a very unique park where most of our parks are visible by a main thoroughfare. So there's eyes on it all the time. You can't drive down Riverside Drive and see what's going on in that park. So it's a magnet for things to happen after dark. So the only way that I would even entertain this is, and I told the gentleman that contacted me, is that whatever money that the developers put in there and the city has put in there, you would have to make us some kind of sweetheart deal and give us double that or something crazy like that, so that maybe we take that I'm just making up numbers, maybe we take that $3 million and we fix the boardwalk and all that stuff at Sunrise Park. Because FEMA's not going to pay for it, we know that. But so that's the only way I would even think about it, is that they have to make us some kind of sweetheart deal so that then they can put a fence around that thing and it becomes part of their development.
Right.
Because that was part of the original agreement, as I understand it, from Marina Grande and the city, that they were going to make it a public amenity. And so that's the only way I would even want to talk about it. But-
Right. I agree. I don't think this is going to come forward because I think you're right that the bar would be too high to begin with for someone to come in to make it worthwhile, because of the community value of it, number
Right.
one, and we would have to get so much extraordinary. We'd have to double what we're giving to the citizens now, and
Right.
at a least we'd have to double. And so I don't think that is going to happen. So, and as you said, I wouldn't even entertain it unless it was like, it was
Gotta be
an
a
offer you
sweetheart
couldn't
deal.
absolutely refuse. And, I love the park. I've gone down there several times. And so, I want access there. It's an important park to me, obviously. And so I'm right there with you. So is there any other comments? Does anybody have any differing opinions?
So we'll take no action on that, and
Yeah, I would say take no action. I would strike it from the list right now, unless there's objection.
What I told the person that contacted, I said, you go to the state.
Right.
If you go to the state and you get the state to agree to that, then maybe we can talk, but keep in mind, it's got to be a sweetheart deal.
Right. The state's the one driving the boat anyway, so they have it. But they wouldn't do it if we said no.
Right.
So we're the protector of it. All right, next. So I wrote down the list there for you, Joe, so you don't have to go line by line. You kind of mentioned it, John, Sunrise Park upgrade. This is something I've talked about previously, with maybe in the future putting towards upgrading our picnic tables and the pavilion areas. If you go out there, there years and years of being right there on the river, taking abuse. Many years of people carving their names into the wood.
nasty comments about the city manager.
Right?
You saw that?
No, I wrote it.
It is there.
We found the culprit. So, as a goal, I would like to keep our eye on making those upgrades, and I don't think that we can get it done with our capital projects in this budget, but certainly we can plan to have that as a priority going into our next budget session.
And one thing we can always keep in mind, I don't know if you've been approached, but often it could be an Eagle Scout project or something like that. A young man wants to do something, let's tell him, hey, go build 6 new picnic tables down there in our park
Oh,
or something
that's
like
good,
that.
yeah.
Get some free labor. We got some bricks out here that some kid did a couple of years
About
ago.
the 7-4, what's the Boy Scout group that gets involved in everything?
I don't know.
The ones that camped out at the cancer benefit thing we did and all that. The
Was it Boy
relay.
Scouts?
Yeah, the one group that seems to be involved in all that. Dave was the scoutmaster.
I think they meet in the clubhouse, don't they still?
I don't know. I mean, with all this COVID, who
used to.
knows? But I mean, those
But anyhow,
guys seem
just-
to be
just something-
community,
Maybe you can get some of that
Involved,
done for free.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Is there any other ideas on that, or any objection to keeping that on the list? All right.
So you're talking about picnic tables, pavilions?
Right. General improvements.
Well, we know that the irrigation system over there is problematic, and I
Right.
think, Anton, was it about 30,000 to get that fixed? thereabout,
30,000?
between replacing lines and heads and the irrigation pump itself, and it's
Well,
quite
maybe that should be a
expensive.
part of what we look at next year of a whole park upgrade and put some substantial money towards it. Historically, we have about $600,000 of capital improvements to take a look at, so we can maybe make a dent in that. Playground at Hollyland Park. So one thing, this came from me, one thing that that I was looking at with the whole project over there that I really wish I thought of earlier on in the process with Pictona is building a playground there. And several members of the public have brought it up, and I'm sure you've seen in the public forums out there, that, oh, they took away the playground and they're not replacing it. There are a few places to put it on the city-owned area. For instance, I think probably the best place would be in front of Field 4, near the backstop almost. There's quite a bit of land there to build a playground there. I thought that it would be important to include on a goal setting to look into the future that I would love to have a playground there, and I don't know where the rest of you
Right
stand.
across from where it was, basically, right across the road from where it was.
Right across, yeah. So I don't know if that's something that this commission wants to look at trying to get funded in the future, or if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Mr. Mayor, the one thought I have, just currently, is I would be concerned for the safety of the kids due to vehicular traffic or whatever the case was, especially while they were having tournaments and stuff over there. And I would be a little more concerned for the safety. Kids running around, you just never know where a little kid's going to run to, unfortunately. And if you've got, it was 300 was the registered total number of people for October so far, and they were capping it at 400.
Oh, for the tournament, yes.
And so when they're going to have those events, I would really be concerned about the safety of those kids running around at the same time. Not that, I wouldn't want to, we could maybe put playground equipment at the Heyman Park. I don't know if there's room there, but
No, there's really no room at Hayman Park. You've got playgrounds at 7th Street, Ross Point,
and Sunrise.
Sunrise Park, Centennial Park. So you got 4.
Okay. But
Parks
for
and playground.
for a playground to be there, I would just be concerned about that. And I don't know if shutting it down during those times would be prudent, but that would be my main concern about that.
Okay. Yes.
I see that park 40 years ago in my mind, and that wheel of death that we all went on and went flying off of. But I don't see the park gearing towards children anymore. I see that park geared towards people over 40 years old. Playground equipment is very expensive. And when we put it in, we've got a plan to replace it. And that's something that we as a government very rarely do. We don't replace things until they're absolutely hazardous, and then we have to shut them down, and they're shut down for 2 years till we can save the money to replace the slide or the swing. I just don't think it goes together. I don't see people coming there with young children. I see it as an active senior center. I don't know if you guys have been over there lately to look at the public area. It's amazing. So I would rather take whatever capital outlay that we were looking at for playground equipment there and shift it to Sunrise Park like that.
All right. Well, and interest of time, we'll move forward unless there's any major comments or thoughts. So we can strike that for now. If there's a plan later to come up with that, we can talk about that later. One thing I did want to get to before the meeting tonight that we're having, and by the way, for the people that just joined us, we're still in a workshop setting, so you didn't miss the meeting or anything. It's still coming up at 7. But the live video streaming on there, and the reason I wanted to bring it up before the meeting tonight was because Joe, would this be a possibility to include onto the list of the eligible expenses to get back from the county? So
Yeah,
if we were to
probably
say, that, I don't know, whatever it is, we'll talk to Scott about it, but $20,000 to buy cameras and microphones so that way our streaming would be, high quality. If we could put that on there and see if the county would approve it.
Shocked we didn't think about that.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
So.
Good idea, Mayor.
So, is everyone initially in favor
We
of
could
trying to get that
the-
funded?
Yes, I would. I would-
As long as we don't have to spend 20 grand.
Right.
If we got the funding for it, yes.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm getting nods.
Can you, you're the techie guy. Can you do that through like Facebook Live?
Yeah, you can
That's what
for
they do with my
free.
son's,
I mean, you just put a camera over there, right? and
Right.
Facebook Live.
But you got to buy the camera and you got to buy the right audio equipment, so that way that it will do it. You can't just use a phone. It's not going to be
Okay.
hooked up to the mics. We want it to be, hooked up
If
to
you're
the
gonna do
mics.
it, if you're gonna do it, I want it done well.
Right,
But
I
I don't want
agree.
to spend a ton of money to do it.
I agree,
because
I agree.
I think when we did it before, we had like 4 viewers.
And I was one of them.
the other.
Yeah, yeah. All right, moving on in the interest of time. Body cams, that is in our budget this year, and I think it's important that we include that for our officers, and my statement on that would be that, this is to protect our officers because we all see the reports, and thank God, praise God, that we don't have problems that are arising or lots of complaints on our officers because they do such a good job. So it's
actually a model to protect everyone.
it's
Protect the
a model to
officers.
protect everyone, but I want to make sure that this isn't something that the cops would see as a intrusion into them. And from speaking to several cops, not necessarily of our agency, that they would appreciate it. So I think it's the way that the city needs to go. It protects the city, it protects the people, it protects the officers, and it's kind of a no-brainer. So it's in the budget already this year. If anyone wants to take that off.
No.
Anybody want to make a quick comment on it?
I would just like to say that over my experience with the different officers, they have gotten to the point now to where they do appreciate that because it can show a different view
Right.
of what may have occurred. So,
Protects good cops, and we have good cops here in Holly Hill.
right.
Veterans Memorial, that also is on our budget, and I very much want to keep that in. And so it's good to keep on here unless somebody else wants to strike. I don't think so. But we will, one thing I'll quickly say is when we do build this, when we do the unveiling, which probably, hopefully can be on a holiday, Congressman Waltz, I've already talked to him, he will be here. He will make sure that he reschedules his appointments. We will make a request to the governor, but fat chance that he'll come, but we'll try nonetheless. He did help us out here in Volusia with the expedited lines. It may end right there, so we'll see. Street repaving, I did ask Stella to have prepared remarks on that, but let's go ahead really quickly. And LPGA, no, let's skip that for now. Property annexations, let me talk quickly about that. I talked to Joe about how aggressive could we be on property annexations because we are so landlocked, and there's a little bit of room to grow. And I even, something that I never thought I would do, thought about expanding west again, and I know the city has tried. And what I talked to Mr. Forte about, which I don't think it's going to be possible because of the amount of money that we have to take in to provide new services, and then the amount of money that we can get out of the, who would we be serving and the valuations there. I don't think necessarily mesh, but we talked about it with values going up, and they're up substantially. If we were to continue that long term, There may be a fiscal way to actually have that done, but it would just take such a huge process, and and I hate to say this because I hate when government does studies and spends $20,000 on a study, but it would, in my vision, take some type of professional study to look at every single amount of taxation that could be there to provide the services without burdening our current residents and our current businesses. But I'm thinking very long-term, long range, because other than a few businesses that Mr. Forte is already trying to bring into the city, which we can talk about, we don't really have any other way to grow. And so, as we all know, we got to concentrate on redevelopment, not development. So, so now pivoting to that, the property annexations, I think that it needs to stay on our goals because of getting a new community development director. I think we need to be aggressive with the businesses right on the outskirts of our town to bring them in, because it does mean very well fiscally for the city. So I don't know if anyone has anything to add or expand upon that, or any questions. Yeah, Vice Mayor.
I know Nick was working on this before he left, and I'm in agreement with the US 1 corridor. There's some unincorporated county there. Maybe we square it off between us and Ormond. But when we start going west, I think you have to consider the cost-benefit analysis. Right. And my son lives out in that area, and code enforcement in our city is terrible, but in the unincorporated county there is 10 times worse. And much of the misperception that our city has gleaned over the past 50 years comes from that area. Right. And so I don't think we'd be doing ourselves any favor to go west. And they would have to voluntarily
Pull up the internet.
agree with it anyways. And they've tried 2 or 3 times in the past.
When you hit it on the head, the only reason I even thought, what made me reconsider it is we already get that misconception now.
Yeah.
And we have no control over it. The county doesn't listen to us. So if we could, and then step up code enforcement.
But then we'd have to take on Station 11 and
Right.
fire
There's
services
a lot of
and
cost.
police
And
services, and I don't think we would get
the most complicated will be the service of water and sewer, because Daytona services that.
Right.
That's right.
So
That's where the money
that's-
is. That's where the money is.
that's where the difficulty would
Yeah.
be, if we could even do it. So, but I think for now, we keep property annexations on there, specific to US 1 and bringing businesses in.
I think we just need, I think the people that have voluntarily annexed in the last few years have found it favorable for them. So I think we should be open to it, but maybe not aggressively pursue it, but be open to it, if that's.
Well, I would like the will of this commission to be that when he comes in, our new community development director, to come in and actually visit these places like Nick Conti was working to do, and to tell them, here's how you come in, here's what we can do. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right. Is there any objection? Sorry, I'm going fast, but trying to get through most of this.
As you're on that, I want to make sure that you are all thinking about this in the right perspective. And when you look at the map I just pulled up, where am I? Here I am. The area that's available to be annexed, and it's hard to see on here because of the colors, it's only the area of Avenue A and a couple of these properties down along just the Derbyshire area. Everything else you see in yellow is already annexed into Daytona, and everything is green is already annexed into Ormond Beach. So you're only talking about the properties that those two cities did not want to annex, and let that put it into perspective.
Gotta ask yourself why.
Right, and the why was.
Why didn't they?
The why was so that we would have, everyone thinks it's Holly Hill. Believe it or not, when I've heard someone say something negative, I say, what are you talking about? And they talk about Derbyshire. I say, well, that's well beyond our reach. That's county,
right.
so it's not a part of the city. So that was why I was thinking of it, is maybe if we did have that control, we could hopefully make it better. But as many of our streets are happening, we can go to LPGA widening, but we have all talked about that so much, and if we have a minute, we can afterwards. But Stella, would you mind coming to the podium. I asked her to take a look at our street repaving project, and I thought and we have 7 minutes to the meeting, so let's not make it too lengthy, but maybe just an overview of how our paving project has gone. And by the way, I drove here today, and Flomish is done, and it's painted and beautiful, and man, it was smooth. So that was great. So
Speeding,
I was not speeding.
that's traditionally what happens.
Yeah.
Stella Grenay, Finance Director. So from the funding perspective, of course, Antoine can give you the update about what's actually happening. But the funding source in that fund is state revenue fuel tax, which Commissioner Curry, I am with you because we are down about 12% in the current year, and then next year it's declining even farther. So we had about 100, or we're supposed to get by the end of the year, we haven't got it all yet, 140,000 in state revenue. And we've got the 200,000 that we're paying from the solid waste fund over to that fund for the mobility fee. So by the end of the year, we should have a fund balance based on what Antoine has encumbered so far. He may have some more that's not hit yet, I'm not sure. About 96,000 left in that fund. And then next year, the revenue goes down, the state revenue, to 126,000 is what they're projecting, which, again, I don't know how much faith we can rely on that. And then we do have the 200,000 from the solid waste fund also coming in there. So that would leave about, if within that year's revenue, about 326,000 next year. So I know the city manager,
Yeah, if you remember back when John McKinney was here, we talked about two options. One was taking out $1 million loan from the solid waste fund and then paying that back over the next 10 years from the local option gas tax, meaning you do 1 year of a lot of paving and 9 years of no paving. And we steered away from that because of the unknown. So what we did was we decided to charge the solid waste fund a user fee for the solid waste trucks being the heaviest, largest trucks on our roads that are tearing the roads up. And the auditor at the time said, yeah, you can charge a nominal fee for that. So between the fee that we charged, I think that's
200,000.
This year we charged 200,000. And the local option gas tax that we get. Now remember this, 2 local option gas tax. The first generation tax that we get is actually used to fund our staff in the roads department. The second generation is used for the improvements of resurfacing. So you've got that little bit of money where you might get 325,000, including the money that we're taking from the solid waste fund to do road paving. So we could either stay on that track and do about $300,000 a year, which is very nominal, very small amount, or we can say, well, we'll pay every other year about $500,000. But that's really the options that we're looking at. I wouldn't recommend dipping into the solid waste fund anymore unless I get an auditor that tells us that we can do that.
Meaning continue the 200,000 though.
Right.
But no more than 200.
Right.
I agree with that. And honestly, it's probably a discussion that's going to go a lot longer than 3 minutes. So we can actually, you know what, we only have 2 items. Let's continue this discussion, if I have no objection, after our regular commission meeting.
We're not on a time schedule. This can go from now till forever.
What is?
The goals.
Any of this, we got to remember, normally we would be
Right, but we
doing
only have 2
Normally, we start
two
this till
items
January.
left.
Yeah, it's
We're months
good.
That's
ahead.
true. We
We're months
normally
ahead.
do start it, yeah.
Yeah, it has no.
But I don't
effect
think
on
that we need
budget.
another hour-long meeting over 2 items, though. So,
We can continue it after the meeting if that's your pleasure.
Yeah, that's fine.
okay. Thank you so much, Stella. We'll revisit this later. At this time, unless there's anything further for this workshop, we're going to go ahead and adjourn, so we have a few minute break, and we'll start back at 7.
Good, Scott, what's happening?
With that, we are adjourned.
Email. Thank you. 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 Email. Thank you.